Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, your daily gateway to the most impactful business books, shaping industries and driving innovation. I'm your host, Maxwell Thornton, and today we're diving into a book that has revolutionized the way many successful leaders approach decision-making and organizational culture. We'll be exploring Principles, Life and Work by Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, one of the world's largest and most successful hedge funds. Now, before we dive in, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wished for a guidebook to life, a set of rules that could help you navigate the complexities of your personal and professional life with clarity and confidence? Well, that's exactly what Ray Dalio has attempted to create with his book, Principles. And by the end of this episode, you'll have a deep understanding of how these principles can transform your approach to decision-making, problem-solving, and achieving success. Let me start with a story that illustrates the power of Dalio's principles in action. It's 2007, and the global economy is humming along. Most financial experts are optimistic about the future, but at Bridgewater Associates, alarm bells are ringing. Ray Dalio and his team, guided by their carefully crafted principles and decision-making systems, are seeing patterns that remind them of previous financial crises. They're noticing an unsustainable buildup of debt, particularly in the housing market. While many dismissed their concerns, Bridgewater stuck to its guns. They made investment decisions based on their analysis, which was deeply rooted in their principles of radical truth and radical transparency. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, Bridgewater was one of the few firms that not only survived but thrived, delivering significant returns for their clients while many others suffered massive losses. This story isn't just about making good investment decisions. It's about the power of having a clear set of principles that guide your thinking and decision-making, especially when the stakes are high and the pressure is on. It's about having the courage to see reality for what it is, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. Now, you might be thinking, that's great for a billionaire hedge fund manager, but how does this apply to me? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Dalio's principles aren't just for Wall Street titans. They're designed to be applicable to anyone who wants to improve their decision-making and achieve their goals, whether in business, relationships, or personal growth. Think of these principles as a GPS for your life and career. Just as a GPS helps you navigate unfamiliar territory and reach your destination, these principles can help you navigate the complex terrain of life and work, guiding you towards your goals. And just like a GPS, these principles don't make the decisions for you. They provide you with the information and framework you need to make better decisions yourself. So let's dive into the first and perhaps most fundamental of Dalio's principles: embrace reality and deal with it. This principle is all about seeing the world as it really is, not as you wish it to be. It's about facing hard truths head-on, even when they're uncomfortable or challenging. Dalio encapsulates this in his concept of radical truth and radical transparency. Now, when Dalio talks about radical truth, he's not just talking about not lying. He's talking about an active commitment to understanding and communicating what's really going on, both in the world around you and within yourself. It's about constantly asking yourself, what's true? What am I missing? What don't I know? And radical transparency takes this a step further. It's about creating an environment where this truth-seeking is the norm, where people feel not just comfortable, but obligated to share their honest thoughts and critiques. Let me give you an example of how this played out at Bridgewater. Dalio recounts a time when an employee sent him an email after a meeting, essentially saying, "Ray, you deserve a D- for your performance today." The email went on to detail why the employee thought Dalio had done a poor job in the meeting. Now, in most companies, an email like this would be career suicide, but at Bridgewater, it was not only acceptable, but encouraged. Dalio didn't fire the employee or get defensive. Instead, he thanked them for the feedback and used it as an opportunity for improvement. This might sound extreme, and in many ways, it is. But think about the benefits of this approach. When people feel free to speak their minds, to challenge ideas regardless of who they come from, you create an environment where the best ideas can flourish. You reduce the risk of groupthink and create a culture of continuous improvement. But embracing radical truth and transparency isn't easy. It requires overcoming our natural tendencies to avoid conflict, to protect our egos, to sweep uncomfortable truths under the rug. It requires a commitment to personal growth and a willingness to face our own weaknesses and mistakes. So how can you apply this principle in your own life and work? Start small. The next time you're in a meeting and you disagree with something, speak up, share your perspective, even if it goes against the consensus. Or the next time you make a mistake, resist the urge to make excuses or deflect blame. Instead, own up to it, analyze what went wrong, and focus on how you can improve. Remember, the goal isn't to be harsh or critical for the sake of it. The goal is to create an environment where truth is valued above comfort, where facing reality, no matter how challenging, is seen as the first step towards improvement and success. Now, let's move on to the second key principle. Use the 5-step process to get what you want. Dalio believes that success in life comes down to 5 basic steps. 1. Setting clear goals. 2. Identifying and not tolerating problems. 3. Diagnosing problems to get at their root causes. 4. Designing plans that will get you around them. And 5. Doing what's necessary to push these designs through to results. Let's break this down with a real-world example. Imagine you're a small business owner, and your goal is to increase your company's revenue by 20% in the next year. That's step 1, setting a clear, measurable goal. As you work towards this goal, you notice that your customer retention rate is lower than you'd like. That's step 2, identifying a problem that's standing in the way of your goal. Now, instead of just trying to patch over this problem with quick fixes, you dig deeper. You survey customers, analyze data, and discover that many customers are leaving because they find your product difficult to use. That's step 3, diagnosing the root cause of the problem. With this understanding, you can move to step 4, designing a solution. In this case, you might decide to redesign your product's user interface and implement a customer education program. Finally, step 5 is about execution, doing what's necessary to implement your plan. This might involve hiring a UX designer, developing new training materials, and following through to ensure these changes are having the desired effect. This process might seem straightforward, but Dalio argues that most people get tripped up at various stages. They set vague or unrealistic goals. They ignore problems or treat symptoms rather than root causes. They design plans based on what they want to be true rather than what is true, or they fail to push through when the going gets tough. The power of this 5-step process is that it provides a clear framework for approaching any challenge or goal. It forces you to be systematic and thorough, to face reality at every step, and to take concrete action towards your goals. I encourage you to try applying this process to a goal or challenge in your own life. Write down your goal, identify the problems standing in your way, dig deep to understand the root causes of these problems, design a plan to overcome them, and then commit to taking action. You might be surprised at how this systematic approach can bring clarity and progress to even the most daunting challenges. Now, let's move on to the third principle. Be radically open-minded. This principle is closely related to the idea of radical truth and transparency, but it focuses specifically on how we approach ideas and decision-making. Dalio argues that one of the biggest barriers to success is our tendency to let our egos and blind spots get in the way of seeing things clearly. To illustrate this, Dalio often uses the concept of another one of those. He points out that most situations we encounter in life are repeats of things that have happened many times before, both to us and to others. The key is to recognize these patterns and learn from them. But to do this effectively, we need to be radically open-minded. We need to be willing to consider that we might be wrong, that someone else might have a better perspective or idea, that there might be important information we're missing. This is where Dalio's concept of an idea meritocracy comes in. In an idea meritocracy, the best ideas win out, regardless of where they come from. It's not about consensus or democracy, and it's certainly not about top-down decision-making. It's about creating an environment where ideas can be shared freely, debated thoughtfully, and evaluated objectively. At Bridgewater, Dalio implemented this through a variety of tools and practices. For example, they use a tool called the dot collector, which allows employees to rate each other in real time on a variety of attributes. This creates a constant flow of feedback and helps to surface the most valuable insights and ideas, regardless of hierarchy. Now, becoming radically open-minded isn't easy. It requires overcoming our natural tendencies towards confirmation bias, the tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. It requires being willing to change our minds when presented with new information. And perhaps most challengingly, it requires separating our ego, our sense of self-worth, from our ideas. So, how can you cultivate radical open-mindedness in your own life? Start by practicing intellectual humility. Whenever you're about to make a decision or form an opinion, pause and ask yourself, what am I missing? What would I need to see to change my mind? Seek out people who disagree with you and really listen to their perspective. Try to understand not just what they think, but why they think it. Another powerful practice is to keep a decision journal. Write down the major decisions you make, along with your reasoning and expectations. Then, review these periodically to see how things actually turned out. This can help you identify your blind spots and improve your decision-making over time. Remember, the goal of being open-minded isn't to be wishy-washy or to constantly change your mind. It's to ensure that your beliefs and decisions are as well-informed and reality-based as possible. It's about being strong enough in your ego that you can admit when you're wrong or when someone else has a better idea. Now, let's move on to our fourth and final principle for today. Understand that people are wired very differently. This principle is all about recognizing and leveraging the fact that different people have different ways of thinking and different strengths and weaknesses. Dalio argues that understanding these differences is crucial for effective teamwork, management, and personal growth. At Bridgewater, Dalio developed a system of personality assessments and what he calls baseball cards, profiles that outline each employee's strengths, weaknesses, and personality traits. The idea is that by understanding how people are wired, you can better predict how they'll perform in different roles and situations, and you can create teams that complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. For example, Dalio identifies two broad types of thinkers: creatives who are good at generating ideas and seeing the big picture, and systematizers who are good at working out the details and implementing plans. Both types are valuable, but they think and work in very different ways. By understanding these differences, you can assign people to roles that play to their strengths and create teams that balance different thinking styles. But this principle goes beyond just personality types. It's about recognizing that people have fundamentally different ways of perceiving and processing the world. Some people are naturally more optimistic, others more pessimistic. Some are more emotional, others more logical. Some are big-picture thinkers, others are detail-oriented. Understanding these differences can transform the way you approach relationships and teamwork. Instead of getting frustrated when someone doesn't see things the way you do, you can appreciate that they might be bringing a valuable different perspective. Instead of trying to change people, you can focus on putting them in roles where their natural strengths can shine. So, how can you apply this principle in your own life and work? Start by trying to understand your own wiring. What are your natural strengths and weaknesses? How do you tend to approach problems? What kind of work energizes you and what drains you? Then, start paying attention to these factors in the people around you. When you're working on a project, think about how different team members might perceive and approach the task differently. When you're in a disagreement with someone, consider how their different wiring might be influencing their perspective. You might even consider using personality assessments in your workplace, like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator or the Big 5 personality test. But remember, the goal isn't to put people in boxes or to use these assessments as excuses. It's to gain insight that can help you communicate better, build more effective teams, and leverage diverse perspectives. As we wrap up, let's recap the key principles we've explored today from Ray Dalio's Principles, Life, and Work. 1. Embrace reality and deal with it. Face the truth head-on, even when it's uncomfortable. Create an environment of radical truth and transparency. 2. Use the 5-step process to get what you want. Set clear goals, identify problems, diagnose root causes, design solutions, and follow through with action. 3. Be radically open-minded, cultivate intellectual humility, seek out different perspectives, and create an idea meritocracy where the best ideas win. 4. Understand that people are wired very differently. Recognize and leverage the different ways people think and work to build more effective teams and relationships. These principles have the power to transform the way you approach decision-making, problem-solving, and collaboration. They can help you build a more effective organization, make better decisions, and ultimately achieve greater success in both your personal and professional life. But remember, principles are not rules to be followed blindly. They're tools to help you think better. The real power comes from internalizing these ideas and adapting them to your own circumstances. As I reflect on Dalio's principles, what strikes me most is their emphasis on continuous learning and improvement. Whether it's facing hard truths, systematically working towards goals, being open to new ideas, or understanding different perspectives, these principles all push us to keep growing, learning, and evolving. In a world that's becoming increasingly complex and fast-paced, having a clear set of principles to guide your thinking and decision-making can be invaluable. It's like having a compass that can help you navigate even the most challenging situations. I encourage you to read the full book, Principles, Life, and Work by Ray Dalio. There's so much more depth and nuance to these ideas that we couldn't cover in this episode. And more importantly, I encourage you to start thinking about your own principles. What are the core ideas that guide your decision-making? How can you refine and improve them over time? Remember, the goal isn't to copy Dalio's principles exactly, but to use them as inspiration to develop your own framework for success. Start small, pick one of these principles and try applying it in your life this week. Maybe practice radical honesty in your next meeting, or use the 5-step process to approach a challenge you're facing. As always, you can find a link to purchase Principles, Life, and Work in our notes below. Whether you prefer the physical book, ebook, or audiobook, I highly recommend adding this to your reading list. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of CEO's Library, the 1% Bookshelf. Remember, the books we read today shape the leaders we become tomorrow. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing.